Hey, welcome to the Book of Dad Radio Show. I'm Dr. Robert Benson. As always, before we get started, we want to say thank you to Jehovah. Thank Him for His Son, Jesus Christ. Thank Him for our families. Thank Him for work and our ability to do the things we're able to do. Book of Dad Radio Show. And of course, I'm hanging out with my main man, Eddie Ice G. What's up, Eddie?
What's up, brother? How's your day?
My day is great, man. How about yours?
Every day I wake up and I can stand up and get out of the bed is a good day, man. We're at that age now.
Hey, but man, just a sidetrack for just a second. Speaking of being able to stand up and get out of your bed, how about Brittany Griner? She can probably stand up now and lay in a good bed. How about that?
Yep. Yeah, right.
Yeah. But man, but you have to wonder on some levels about that. Is really being privileged an entirely fair thing to the general public? But that's not what this show is about today, right? Today, we have the pleasure of having a very, very, very good friend of mine with us. And the reason why I want to talk to this person, because I'm of the mindset that you have two things. You have a vocation and an avocation. Your vocation is how you pay the bills. It's where you get your money from. It's how you keep things going. And then your avocation, in a lot of cases, can be considered a hobby, something that keeps your blood pumping, if you will. Well, today, I'm talking to a professional who is at the apex of both sides of those dichotomies, if you will. So without any further ado, I'm going to ask Miss Joann Norwood to say hello to us this evening. What's up, JoJo?
Hey there. Hey, we finally were able to get together. I appreciate being on the show. It is so good to finally be able to do this. And I'm very grateful. So thank you for having me.
Well, Joe, we're so glad to have you here. And you're obviously articulate and beautiful. But
I'll pay you later.
You need to put another installment on it. You already paid me once. But JoJo, what is it that you do that mixes that advocation and vocation flavor that makes you the awesome juggler that you are and a successful person? Talk to us.
Well, I don't have a choice. And when I say I don't have a choice, failure, I've learned the hard way. It's not an option. It's not option. And so, when you're thrown into a plethora of things, career and, fitness goals that you've started and now everyone's watching, divorce and things like that, that's the water that you're in. And so by nature, we panic, and part of that panic is kicking and swimming to survive. And so you just find yourself coping. And then, there's different levels. There's the survival mode, then there's the maintenance mode, and then there's the thriving mode. And so either way, you're kicking and trying to eventually, tread water and thrive. And so it's just a skill set. Juggling is a skill set. Yeah.
It's very interesting. Very interesting. I've never heard it delineated like that, different phases. So if I was to ask you in particular, what phase are you in right now?
I would say I'm a little bit from in between the maintenance and thriving, because I think it fluctuates. Sometimes you're in the survival mode, like post-divorce or COVID, or something happens with the children. You kind of go into the survival mode. Then because of your coping strategies, having been there before, you can quickly transition back into the maintenance mode. But the stretch is getting into that thriving mode and staying there, or quickly getting back there. And so I've been thriving before. And so I've learned to give myself permission, that, hey, you get knocked down, you get back up. So I'll be thriving again soon. And it's a mindset. It's a mindset. And it's also, relative. We had that situation with the football, Yeah. And people are looking at us like, you guys bought the refs and such. And so I'm like, we don't have that kind of money. But I think I'm knocking on the thriving again. And I'm just grateful, for whatever level I'm at, because I'm still here.
Joann, the thing I find very, very interesting about you is that the two things that we're going to talk about with you today are things that are very, very highly competitive, in which you have to be on your A game all the time. One in the physical sense and the other one in the procedural one, professional one. As we get close to finishing up our discussions today, I want you to think about those two things. And I want you to talk about how you have to keep your knife sharp and to be competitive in real estate and doing the same thing to be competitive in competitions.
I'll start with fitness. The pressure that one puts on themselves. Once you say, I'm going to do something, you're watching to see if you can. A lot of times you haven't been in that platform before. And so that, and then if you say it loud enough and others hear you, it's on, and so believing in yourself, self-esteem. And so the first time I got on stage, I was one of the oldest ones on stage. And in the beginning, people laughed, like, what in the world is she doing? I had no muscles. I was just streaming pretty much. And then I kept going. And in my family, genetics, and it's an interesting thing, my genetics allow me to put on muscle very quickly. And so, the downside is that, cancer runs in my family because of that cellular growth. But at the same time, muscle grows very, very quickly. And so I put on muscle very fast. And so the next show that I did, people weren't laughing so much. And I ended up getting my pro card faster than anybody else in Atlanta. And I did it at 41. And so by that time, everybody was just quiet. And it was exhilarating. And that was actually what gave me the momentum to keep going forward. Now they just take notes.
Take notes. Outstanding. I love it, JoJo. And I want to talk more about this pro card when we come back from a break. But this is Dr. Robert Benson with my main man, Eddie Ice G. And we're talking to Joann Norwood, who is an accomplished and ranked bodybuilder. But we're going to pick her brain some more when we get back. Book of Dad Radio Show, Dr. Robert Benson, and we'll be right back.
See why listeners from over 150 countries around the world follow the Book of Dad Radio Show. Join Dr. Robert Benson and Eddie G as they chat with special guests who share their stories and information that will change your life. Watch and listen on lifeandspiritonline.com or subscribe to the Book of Dad Radio Show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcast. Brought to you by the NASCA Network.
Hey, welcome back to the Book of Dad Radio Show with Dr. Robert Benson and me, Eddie G. Today, we have the fabulous Joann Norwood, who is here giving us the insight on her complicated and very rewarding life as a real estate person, as well as an IFBB bodybuilder, among other things. I had a quick question for you, Joann. I know you mentioned that when you started, you were really thin, and when you came back, you had put on muscle really quickly. And all the people who were laughing at you at first, they weren't laughing anymore. Was that because you were able to now punch them in the face?
Yes. With success.
Tell us about that process. Well, one thing I also wanted to mention, you talked about life itself. And while you were describing that, it made me think about the bodybuilding process, where you go through phases. You go through the phase where you're really building and working hard to get your physique the way it has to be. And then you have that process where you're in competition mode. And then you have that other process where you're coming down from that mode and now you can relax. How would you compare those two?
I would say that the hardest part is coming down. You would think the hardest part was building. Showtime is that ground zero. So once that happens, you realize, man, everything that I did paid off. I see the results, and you want to stay there. Anything after this is just, it's down. So the coming down part, where people are going back to whatever they're doing, they're not watching on stage. You're still reveling in your success, and it's over with. So, but in terms of building, a lot of folks think I got to starve, and lose weight, bring my weight down, lose fat. And actually bodybuilding is the opposite of that, because muscle is heavy. And so the more muscle you put on, the muscle is like the frying pan, and the fat around the muscle is like the butter. So the more you work that muscle, the muscle's getting bigger and it's burning that fat. And so what you'll find is basically 5 pounds of muscle weighs the same as 5 pounds of fat. However, if you have 5 pounds more of muscle, you're going to look entirely different than 5 pounds of fat. It's a totally different look. And so what happens with a female, men don't like to say this, but we get curves. We start to look very curvy. You know, the calves are popping, the glutes are popping, the waist is snatched, delts are like, you know. And so it looks great. And that's part of the process. Yeah. And so that muscle starts coming and the shape comes with it. You know, when you put your clothes on, everything fits in all the right curves and stuff. And that's without posing. And so that's the best part. Then you get on stage because, of course, you are dieting to a certain extent, not as much as people think. And so it's basically the last week is more about conjugating water, you know, pulling that water from the body. And that makes the skin collapse onto the muscle. And at that point, you're just shredded. And that's the highlight. And so you have to give yourself time after the show, you know, to get your hormones back in shape, back to normal. That's usually about a week. But yeah, I would say coming down is the hardest part.
Well, that's a great point, because my question is, you know, years ago I caught myself being competitive in boxing, and there was always a process where you trained for so long and then you got ready for the event. Well, sports like that tend to be plagued with performance enhancing substances and things
Steroids.
of that sort. Right. So yeah, steroids. Now in most of your sports that are very competitive, when you got combat competitive, collision competitive, you see a lot of screening and such for those substances. Is there screening involved in weightlifting at all?
In some leagues, a majority of the leagues, there are screening because they want people to feel free enough to come and compete. But the league that I'm in, there's absolutely no screening. And so if jet fuel works, people are going to use it. You'd be surprised, you know, people will come out and say, you know, jet fuel actually helps you get a pump, and people will start using jet fuel. That's why you have to be careful. And so when I first started out, the coach that I used, he had sent me, I thought they were GNC supplements. He was like, here, take these. And like within 30 days, my muscles were full and round and everything. And I was like, I'm out. Can you send me some more? And he was like, yeah, here's the website. You go to an order. And I was like, this is steroids. I was like, no. And I couldn't work with him anymore because he didn't give me that choice to decide whether or not I wanted to do that. But once that happened, and again, because of my genetics, I add muscle very quickly. The muscle just kept coming. It's almost like it changed me at a genetic level. And there are different categories in bodybuilding. And so I ended up muscling out of that category. And so that was frustrating. New category comes out. It originated in Brazil. It's called wellness, where women are thick from the waist down. So it's kind of like a dinosaur concept, little bitty arms, big bottoms, quads are huge. It's a nice look, actually. And I fit right in. And so I go up against girls from Brazil and Spain, a lot of the Latinas, and they are just like superhuman. And so, they're 18 and up from around the world. And the last show that I did in Phoenix, I was 49, rounding 50, on stage. And I got 4th place out of 11 girls. And so everybody in Atlanta, my phone was just blowing up. And the first thing I thought was, let me get out of here before they figure out what they did. But then I went back and looked at the pictures and thought, I did do that. I did that. And so now, much respect. I get respect now on the pro side, because that was the Olympia bid. I could have gone to Olympia if I got in 1st place. And so I'm so excited about next year. So excited.
Okay, sounds great. Well, as we approach a break here, I just want to remind our listeners how to listen to us and be entertained and informed by great guests like we have, like Joann Norwood here. Get us wherever you get your podcasts, and we're on YouTube as well. But it's the Book of Dad radio show. I'm Dr. Robert Benson. We come back, we're going to try and shift gears with JoJo a little bit to find out a little bit more about real estate and finance, so she can help us in that way. We'll be right back.
You have something special. You have greatness in you. Hello, I'm Les Brown, Mrs. Mamie Brown's baby boy. I want you to spread the word to your family members and friends to listen to LesBrownGreatnessRadio.com. Absolutely. And let me share with you, why we're going to be focusing on positive things, because whatever you focus on the longest becomes the strongest. And now more than ever, when the suicide rate has increased over 33%, when the suicide rate of young children between 5 and 11 has doubled, people feeling hopeless and stressed out and powerless. We need programming that can bring out the greatness in them. And that's what we will be focused on. When you listen, it will be an experience that will transform your life. Les Brown, GreatnessRadio.com. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Hey, right back. Book of Dad Radio Show. I'm Dr. Robert Benson. We're going to pick it up where we left off with the lovely Joann Norwood, bodybuilder extraordinaire, and a juggler at the nth degree. She has a family, she has work, and she does the fitness thing. But I can tell you her family is very busy because she has 2 sons. And 2 sons are never bored. There's always something going on. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, but Joe, we want to shift gears real quick. I want to talk about the financial aspect of real estate. I know you're a broker, but I was looking through your dossier or resume, and I saw a term in there, the acronym, which is PFSD. What on earth is that? And it sounds awful familiar to me.
It is a post-financial stress disorder. So in the mental health industry, there's a diagnostic statistical manual of disorders. That's where every possible mental disorder is listed in this purple book. And one term that's missing is, well, they have PTSD, but I had started getting my PhD, and part of my thesis was to offer the opportunity for the DSM-5 to include post-financial stress disorder. So it's basically a concept of people having shell shock, for lack of better terms, from foreclosure and financial setback caused by divorce or layoffs, things like that, where, they get anxiety logging into their bank account, they get anxiety checking the mail. It's very traumatic, especially to lose a house, to have a car foreclosed, or to get declined, on something that's a life dream. And so there are certain symptoms that are associated with the post-financial stress disorder, post-financial traumatic stress disorder. And so I'm lobbying pretty much for that to be introduced into the manual, primarily not only because it raises awareness, but also we can implement treatment, from a banking level. If someone is in check systems, they can go through the counseling sessions that are implemented with evidence-based interventions, and not only have a new checking account, but now be able to sustain it, instead of saying, I won't do it again. Now they have the tools to make sure that doesn't happen.
Quick question on that. Would that encompass a person who, let's say, loses their job? A lot of times people's job become a part of their identity, and they may lose their job because a company failed, but yet they will go into depression because they would feel that they did something wrong. I worked for a big company, and there were a lot of people who were laid off. And when I would run into these people later, they always had a sad story to tell. They always were depressed, versus people who left and took early retirements. So would that factor into the same diagnosis?
Yes. And it seems that the underlying, what I found in my research, the underlying component is self-esteem. And so the theory is that you'll never make more money than your self-esteem allows. And say you get a windfall, if you feel deeply at a self-esteem level that you don't deserve it, people tend to self-sabotage to get back to the equilibrium that's consistent with their self-esteem. Same thing with love and relationships, but we're not talking about that. So financially speaking, employment is tied to the identity. Identity is tied to your self-esteem. And so the thing that you go to work for, you're pouring energy into, effort into, your dreams, is now taken away from you. It's not quitting, but it's taken away from you. It's a direct traumatic, it's like a tower falling. It's unexpected, it's very traumatic, and it's financially related. And it's a direct hit to the self-esteem. And until that healing and proper processing happens, it's hard to get back on one's feet. And sometimes people never come back. They're afraid to apply for that other job, that's comparable to what they had because of the trauma that they experienced. It's a real diagnosis in my eyes.
It's very interesting because Joann, you have this amazing soup, if you will, of abilities and things that you do. I mean, you're a bodybuilder, you're in the real estate, but you also have a clinical psychology background. How does that? What led you to do all of those things? And it's amazingly obvious now how the two marry up just from listening to you talk. What made you want to get into that portion of it?
To be totally honest, my upbringing, mental health is very, it's an unspoken demon in many African-American families, to be honest. We have some of the poorest coping strategies. We have very little guidance because not much emphasis is placed on mental health. I mean, I just heard of an individual, Ellen DeGeneres' DJ just committed suicide. To raise awareness with myself, counseling is expensive and I had plenty of it. And I decided, okay, from a diagnostic standpoint, forensic psychology would probably not probably, but it gave me the most extensive knowledge of the worst type of psychosis that could possibly exist. And I figured if I can understand that, I can understand me. And of course, if you can understand yourself and control yourself, you can pretty much control the world. That's my opinion. By getting to know yourself. And so I was able to implement my own healing, kids were incorporated into that and, just building from within, learned a lot in that process. And so then I started working with people in the mental health industry, in the community that were suffering from severe mental health issues. And I thought, from a financial standpoint, I can see, someone suffering from a financial type schizophrenic, paranoia. It's very parallel, but I just found it fascinating. But I started with myself, pretty much.
Hey, that's amazing you mentioned that because, as I said before, is that a lot of what we do is out of our own personal experiences. We some of the greatest legal law and such like that have been made by people who have been impacted by those situations that happened. For instance, the lady who was responsible for MADD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. She had something happen to her and she lobbied it as far as she could get it. And now it's one of the, more renowned alcohol abuse prevention organizations in the world. So Joann, I see what you're doing and it's heading in that particular direction. But we really appreciate you being on the Book of That radio show, hanging out with Eddie G and myself, huh, Eddie?
Hey, it's been a great pleasure to have you here and to give us some insight on a multitude of things, from building your body to building your mind. And we can all use some of that information. We can all use that to help our lives ourselves, especially Dr. Robert Benson.
And also building your pocket, because that's where I need help at the most.
All right.
In fact, I have that financial traumatic syndrome every time I leave the store.
Oh, you're just very careful and meticulous. He's
most of the time.
Organizer.
He's prudent.
Yeah.
Hey, Jojo, thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for hanging out with us, okay? We'll have your information up on the screen.
Oh, my pleasure.
Okay, absolutely, no doubt. Hey, but I'm going to close the show with a quote like I always do, and just keep this in mind because it kind of makes me think about JoJo and the strides she's made and the places she's gone and where she's come from and those kinds of things. But it simply goes like this. It's that contemporaries will always be the same. Your peers will change. And that depends on where you are and what you were doing. This is the Book of That radio show. I'm Dr. Robert Benson. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.